If you're thinking about doing your own drywall finishing, drywall repairs, whether you're a homeowner or you're a novice trying to learn the drywall trades, you need to know what tools you need for finishing, right? And there's so many choices out there. There's a lot of different things you might want to own. Well, I'm going to help you with that here right after this. Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by my channel here at That Kilted Guy. This is That Kilted Guy DIY Home Improvement channel, and we also have a website at thatkiltedguy.com. Now let's go ahead and get into this video today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through some of the tool choices you might want to consider when doing your own drywall repairs, whether you're going to be all out finishing, whether you're new at this and starting in the trades. There's actually lots of choices out there. There's a lot of different types of knives. There's a lot of different types of materials, shapes of knives, and so on. And I'm going to go ahead and walk you through that. But before I do, if I could ask you guys a favor, here at That Kilted Guy videos, we're trying to put out as many videos as we can like this to educate you guys about doing your own home improvement projects. And you can help us put out more and go full-time on this by a couple of guidelines here. You can be sure and subscribe to our channel like you'll see in this little illustration here. And when you subscribe, be sure and click that little bell icon or you won't ever get notified of our new videos. You can be subscribed all you want, but you just won't know we put out one unless you click that bell. And then also, as you see here, if you do things like comment on our videos, like them, share them, and so on, those things all help our channel grow. Plus, if you want more information, we got some more information on our website. I'll put some of what's on the website off to the side here, because we're trying to put a lot of good resources, downloadable guides. We've got an online tool store where you can pick up pretty much anything that I'm going to show you today. It's all available to our store, and it's an Amazon store. We don't mark anything up. It's an affiliate program. We do make a very small percentage on that, so I appreciate you using those links if you need any of this stuff. And finally, I hope if you get some benefit from our videos, you'll join us over at Patreon. I'll try and put these links in the description down below. If you look down below the video here, you should see a lot more information. Click on the show more and it'll show you a lot more. Okay, let's dive into this. Now I'm going to start at the simplest level. Let's just say you're watching these videos because you want to do your own simple home repairs. Well, if that's the case, you don't need all this. This is just a lot of the basics that I have for finishing. It's not hanging tools, it's not ladders, it's not any of that. It's some of the basics. So I'm going to walk you through it, starting with the simplest. First thing you need is some way to hold mud. Well, over the years I've collected a few mud pans. This is my preferred way. It's not the only way. You've got to pick what fits you, but if you're a beginner, I'd recommend a mud pan. It's the easiest way to go. But there are some pros out there that like a hawk and a trowel, and you'll see some videos like that. And I own this because I have used it a number of times. I just don't like it as much. I'm not as good with it. And the reason is mostly because of what I grew up with. I was walking on a pair of stilts when I was 8 years old because I couldn't reach the nails that were this high. My dad put me on them, and he stuck a pan and a knife in my hand. And then every day after high school, during school, I was on a job. On the weekends, on the summer, I grew up doing this, and it was always a pan and a knife. So this became kind of like my right hand to me. So use what's comfortable to you, but you generally need something, and I would recommend a pan. Now, there's a couple different styles in that of pans. You can get a plastic pan. They have a little metal piece right here, and if you're just doing a little bit, that'll actually get you by. Those actually will do decent for just using now and then. I've actually used them. But you know what, before we get going here, I think I ought to change into a different shirt, so let's do that now. This is actually one of the ones we have in our store. Okay, now here's some things about other things about pans. These are all stainless steel. These are all heliarc. Well, not all of them actually. They're heliarc welded, which means there's no seams inside or outside, and that makes a lot cleaner working conditions. It's much easier to clean without a seam. And I'll show you one with a seam. And the one with the seam, I think I just acquired it somehow. My nephew has left some behind in different situations. Well, a common size is this. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about these pans. Now there's several different sizes. Primarily, there's these two sizes where this one is good for a 12-inch knife. It's about, I think it's a 14-inch pan, so a 12-inch knife fits in it well. Now if you use a bigger knife, a lot of times I do, this is a 14-inch knife, you'll need a 16-inch pan. So let me talk about a couple of other things. I'll show you a little trick. This is one I came up with like 20 years ago or more. I always felt these pans were slick. They get wet, they get mud on them, and they can get kind of slippery, and there's a lot of times when you have to work with the pan kind of behind your back, you'll be spotting nails or bending over or something, and you can drop them and it makes you work harder to hang on to it. So I got this idea to stick tread tape on here. You can see this. This is the same tape I stuck on here 20 years ago. And the same one on that pan. This one is new, but these have both been stuck on here 20 years. So if you clean the surface, stick it on well, it lasts forever. And boy, it really increases your grip. You can just lightly grip this now, and it makes it so it's not near as slick. A lot of times I wear cotton gloves. That makes it even better. So let's move on to the non-heliarc welded. And again, this is the one I don't even know where I got it. I think somebody gave it to me on a job, but you can see these seams right here. And it's okay, but if you were gonna buy something, I'd spend a few more dollars and get the welded one. Now, the next thing you need are some mud knives. You might call them putty knives, spackle knives. We just call them mud knives. And there's so many different kinds and sizes. Like, I'm gonna start with some of the small ones. You see right here, I have just dozens of these tiny little knives like this. And the reason is, when you're doing this stuff, there's so many times you'll be working, say, beside a door where the door trim is, where I'm doing repairs. And sometimes it only leaves you an inch, inch and a half, inch and a quarter, all these different widths, and it's really hard to overlap. Let's say it's an inch and 3/4. It's hard to run a 1-inch putty knife in there and overlap it. So a lot of times I take and just cut them down to the width. These are plastic, they cut with scissors or snips, and I just cut them down to the width I need. Like you can see, that one's been trimmed a little bit. And then I've got the metal ones that you can't cut down, but the plastic ones, I call those my cut down knives. Now there's another thing I do with the plastic knives as a cut down knife. Sometimes you need an odd shape. Well, when you're doing a vaulted ceiling, say, and you've got that upper section, the ridge, and maybe you want to round it. I like to round them. Well, they've got different profiles, so I've got different profiles that I just cut these out of a big plastic knife like this one. And you can lay these down and it actually changes the profile a little bit, so this one will fit multiple profiles up there. And then again, sometimes I cut a little notch out of one. These are pretty cheap. You just cut it to fit what you need. And then if you have, say, again, a vaulted ceiling, a lot of times you'll have this point where the ceiling goes like this, the wall goes like this. A regular mud knife like this just will not fit up in there, because that is a 90 right there. So I have a variety of these that I've cut into various angles, and that way I can get up in there and just touch up that mud, whatever I need to do with those. So there's the cut knives. And there are a number of sizes of these metal knives. I personally think anything below a 6-inch, it gets so stiff, it's really unwieldy. It doesn't want to float mud out well. It makes lots of lines and just digs, and it doesn't really feel good. So personally, the minimum size I would recommend is a 6-inch for a steel knife. Below that, just go ahead and get the plastic. unless you need to do some. These are good for chiseling mud off of things or scraping walls or whatever, because they're so rigid. These have a lot more flex to them, you can see that, and they just work better when you're trying to work on the wall and you need to bend that a little bit. Those won't do that at all. Now there's a lot of different, I forgot I stacked all this up here to be cool for the picture. There's a lot of different types of handles. These are the old school. I've used these millions of times and they work great. These are some modern ones that have rubberized handles, and I kind of like that one. It's not too bad, but it's a little bit small for my hand. I've got bigger hands, so I recently found this one. You can see it's just a much fatter knife, and for my hand it just fits perfect. It's a Marshalltown. You can probably find those through our online store, and it just fits me. And if you don't have a real big hand, these will fit you fine. There's also a solid stainless steel one. The handle, everything is stainless, and it's really pretty, but I wouldn't want it because, again, like I said about the mud pans, it gets slick. Metal gets slick. So this contour actually gives me more grip. I can hang on to it better. So I'll try and make sure I've got this one in the store, but if I don't, just click on any link in my store, look for the Marshalltown, and even if you didn't click on that exact link, I still get a credit for anything that you pick up that day. So go ahead and look for the one that kind of fits you. So that covers our 6-inch knives. The next size up is an 8-inch knife, and you can see I have a few of those too. Now my favorites are these old ones I have right here. It's called a Harrington. I don't even know if you can get them anymore, but the reason it's my favorite is feel. Drywall is an art, and these knives, if you're going to get good at this and you're going to be a pro, you have to find what fits you, and that's one reason I own a lot. You just keep buying knives until you find one that fits you better and does what you want and just feels right in your hand. See, like this one has a wider rib right here, which makes it a little bit stiffer, and that's good for wiping down when you're taping. I like to wipe down with an 8 after you put the mud on the tape, and you wipe it down. That works good. This is a Marshalltown. It's got the rubberized feel and the bigger, and it's same as that, but this rubberized grip feels pretty good, but it's still stiff to me. And this is a cheap one from Lowe's, which it'll get you by. Now what I like about this one is it's got nice flexibility. Again, it's really good for floating out, like if I got a heavy coat, a screw or something, this works great. And I use this for the first coat of corner bead, and then the second one I'll do a 10-inch, or I may use this for the first coat of a recessed joint. You can get by with an 8-inch and go to a 10, but I usually do a 10-inch and then a 12-inch on recessed. Now I modify a lot of my knives. If you look right here, you'll see 2 screws. Now why would you put screws there? Well, if you look at this carefully, let's see if I can show you in the video, you might can see that it's got a slight curve to it. Most all of my bigger blades from 8-inch and up have that, because this part right here is bendable. Let me see if I can show you on the cheaper knife. You can shape these how you want, and because of that, I like, and a lot of guys like, a slight curve to it, and then we work it so that the high points of the knife are here and the low point is right here, and that way these don't dig in and leave as many edges in your mud. And so for when I pick a knife up, I want to be able to feel instantly that I'm using it in the right direction without having to look at it every time. So I can just pick this one up. If it's wrong, I just flip it around and I know where it's at. I like to run it with my finger on the back side too. You can see that shiny kind of spot, that's where my finger rests. So I mark a lot of mine that way. I'll show you another way I mark them. The next size up would be our 10-inch knives, and in these we have a few different choices. We have blue steel. Now some of these were blue steel, some of these were stainless. And you can pretty much tell one's slightly rusty, one's chrome. Now some people hate the fact that these rust, and they say it feels like they're going to get a worse finish. I don't find that. I actually like my blue steel knives to rust. When I buy a knife like this, it's usually all shiny right here and it looks all pretty. Sometimes these are chrome plated. I will take and purposely rust them because that chrome plating to me feels like crap. And again, that's a personal preference. You can see this one hasn't been rusted. This is a pretty new knife I bought mainly for this shop, but I don't like that shiny feel against the wall in that. That's a personal preference. I don't know if any other finishers are watching this. Let me know if you feel the same or if you like yours shiny. I know everybody's got their preference. So as far as the rust goes, usually what I do right before I use these, even if they're the stainless, a lot of times I'll just hit them real quick, and that's mainly to knock off any burrs that I didn't get off of the mud, because I don't clean my knives spotless. All they have to be is clean on the blade and they'll do a great job. The mud up here, unless it's building up and flaking off and getting back in your mud, it's really not important to be super clean. So I just brush it down a little bit, get those bits off, and then once I've done that, it's usually going to be good for the job because I'll clean it up in between with a wet brush, and it usually doesn't get this rusty look to it until I leave it in my box and it sits there wet for several days. But as long as I leave it sitting out to dry at night, just kind of like this, leaning up against something, it usually doesn't even rust. Now here's another way I've modified it. This one is curved like this. I want my finger on this side, so I actually took and dug a groove out the back side so that it's easier to feel on that one. Then you've got some with ergonomic handles. Now for me, the jury's out on this. I don't know if I totally like it. I kind of do, but I don't really think it makes that much difference. But it will keep your knuckles a little bit further away from the work surface. I got a thick mouth today. So sometime when you're working, you might have a habit of dragging your knuckles through the mud. Well, this ergonomic handle will help keep your knuckles away a little bit further, so that might work for you. It doesn't hurt, so if you like it, go for it. Okay, the next size up is 12-inch, and I like stainless in these. They just feel better, but I'm fine with the blue steel too. And again, we just have two types, the thinner spine and the thicker spine. So this one tends to be a little bit more rigid, a little bit more flexible, barely, not much difference, just a matter of taste. And again, I've notched it. And then finally in the size category, usually the biggest most guys will use are these 14-inch knives, and I use this one a lot, and it has a screw driven into the back right there. Same reason, same stories on those. So if you're just starting out in this, if you're just looking to do your own home repairs and that, here's what I'd recommend as a minimum. Get you a 6, a mud pan, and a 10 or a 12. Sometimes the bigger knives can be a little bit difficult for beginners to use, so you might want to just go with a 10. A 10 will do a good job. And if you watch my other video on is wider better, I explain why wider knives tend to be better for floating out, like repairs and bigger joints and that. And I see so many videos where they try and do everything with a 6. It's really not going to give you as good a job. Not that you can't do it, it's going to take you more work, make you have to sand more, and so on. So if you're coating 12, 14, 16 inches wide, don't do it with 4 passes of this. Do it with 1 or 2 with a bigger knife. So that would be the minimum. The next step up, I would go to the 12-inch knife, which I put them all over here. So a 6, a 10, and a 12. That's a good combination with a mud pan. Now here's a few specialty tools, and I've tried these a lot. There's these inside angle when you're taping the inside of an angle tools. You can coat with these too. And I really think, for me, I can do it just as fast without these, but once in a while I'll break one out. It kind of works, just not my favorite. But you can use these for wiping down when you're taping or for coating your angles. But if you watch some of the other videos about that, you can also do it with one side at a time with just a 6-inch knife, because that is a 90 right there. It fits right into your corner. If you run it right, you get a nice clean square corner. Here's another specialty tool you probably don't really need, but this is a bucket scoop. It's really handy. You can see it fits the shape of a bucket. Reach in there, you can scrape up the side nice and clean, because the other way is this tool, and obviously that doesn't scrape up the side as well. You kind of got to turn it sideways to scrape, and then the mud wants to fall off. This will clean your bucket out even better. Now, here's a specialty tool. This little odd thing here, I used to make these out of a caulking tube, and then somebody invented this, and it works really good. If you're doing bullnose corner bead with the rounded profile, when you run it, you always end up with gobs of mud on the rounded part. This will clean that right off. You just run it right up the middle, cleans it, saves you a lot of sanding. Okay, you probably don't need those specialty tools unless you're going to do this for a living. Then I would recommend them. It'll save you a lot of time. Okay, now I mentioned the hawk and trowel. This is the hawk and then trowel, and you got different types of trowels. You've got your flat trowel, and these are pull trowels of different sizes. These are great for coating things because with these rounded edges, they don't dig in and leave those sharp lines on the edges. I use these sometimes for different hand textures. Now, let's get into how to mix your joint compound. Okay, for the simplest way, I have a video out there on how to mix the mud. You can look for it on my channel, and I'm going to show you both ways, a simple way and the fast way. If you're on a budget, you might want just one of these big potato mashers. There's short handled and long handled versions. And do you need a mud mixer? If you're doing just a little bit like nicks and dings and small stuff, you probably don't. You can get by, dip it out, put it in your pan, stir it around, and it'll loosen it up. But if you try and use mud straight, it's got this thick, tight feel to it. It doesn't work as well. Even on the box it says to mix it up. So if you're going to do a whole bucket, if you buy a bucket or a box, either one, you need to kind of stir it, and it loosens it up, makes it creamier, feels better, and it just works better. This will do it, but if you watch my video, it can be pretty difficult. It's a pretty good workout, but it's a lot cheaper than the other option, which is a power mixer. As you can see on the side here, I'm going to show you some of these. This is about $180 tool, but these things are really strong. If you're not careful, you might spin the room around yourself. No, they're not quite that strong, but these are pretty strong. So if you're going to mix a lot of mud, get a good strong drill. Don't go buy one of the cheap Harbor Freight ones for 30 bucks. It might spin it for a while, but I've seen guys do it and they'll burn it up in no time. You'll spend more in the long run. This thing, a drill like this, will last you forever. Now what you put in that drill is a mixing paddle. This is the one I had for a long time, and it will work and it gets the job done, but it's now become my backup mixing paddle. And the reason is, with this two-bladed design, when you get to mixing, it really shakes the bucket. The bucket gets to vibrating pretty bad, and you got to hold it, and it just wants to walk all over and shake mud everywhere, but it does get the job done. My new favorite has become this one, and I'll try and put a link in the store. Just the design of it with the 4 blades, it doesn't shake the bucket so bad. They claim it mixes up a lot faster, and I agree, it does mix up quite a bit faster. If you're on a budget, I think these are quite a bit less, and these also work good for mixing up grout and mortar and things like that. And then there is this tool, which I made this one. There's another one out there similar to it, and I decided to make my own, so I welded this up, and it did a pretty good job. Now what I use this for is, if you notice, it's kind of the shape of a mud pan. Spins inside of there. I used it for mixing up hot mud. If you were just doing a pan or now and then a regular joint compound, you could use it for that also. I've got one coming to me. A guy is sending it to me. He came out with this. It's a new design like that. Looks interesting. I'll be doing a video review of that soon. So be watching for that. That'll be a cool way to mix it up. And then I came up with this. I've got another video out about this already. This is just an ordinary egg beater that I picked up for a couple dollars at Goodwill. I use this for mixing up hot mud. Go watch my other video if you want to see how well it works, but it saves me a lot of time. Okay, I'll briefly touch on some taping tools. For the small guy who's not doing big jobs all the time, you can just tape by hand. If you want to speed things up a little bit, a lot of guys will buy this banjo, and it holds up to a 500-foot roll of tape here. You open this up, fill this up with mud, and as it goes through here, it puts the mud on. And then you can cut it across the end here. These will definitely speed things up, but I find them to be a real pain. I hate these things, but I do use it because it's about 60 bucks for one, or pick one up at a pawn shop for maybe 30 bucks or so. Now if you decide to do very much mesh taping, which you might want to watch my video about mesh tape versus paper tape, there is this tool. It holds the mesh tape on here. Now you put all that mud on, now you probably got to sand. I try and sand it as little as possible. And a lot of times I can get by without much sanding, but you pretty much always got to do some sanding. So let's start with the basics. If you're going to sand by hand, I wouldn't use sandpaper. The reason is your fingers put pressure points on the paper and you'll get grooves and uneven sanding. Use a sanding sponge. This one, it stays a lot flatter, gives you a lot more control. The next step up in hand sanding is a hand sander like this, and I love this tool when I'm doing smaller repairs. It is great for sanding around the edges, a little bit of sanding here and there. But if I'm going to sand very much, I'll either break out the old classic sand pole, which this has got a swivel head, and you can make this thing do pretty much whatever you want by just rotating it. And then the newest design, which I actually go back and forth because this has drawbacks too, is this circular sander. The advantage is that it's harder to flip. With this, if you turn it too much, turn this too sharply like that and go, it'll sometimes catch an edge and it'll flip over and gouge your work. This one is far less likely to flip. Plus it's got this foam in here, so it's soft. It doesn't tend to make gouges as much and so on. And it's Velcro, so it's easy to change. This is also the same size as the other tool I'm going to show you in this picture here, or video. I'm not sure what I'm going to show you, but I use a Porter Cable drywall sander. I have a whole video about that if you want to go see that. That thing is, I've wore the motor out once, I've wore the switch out. It's been a great tool. I use it quite a bit on bigger sanding jobs. If you need that DeWalt tool or any other, yeah, I kind of like DeWalt. You know, there's a lot of good tools out there, but when you get invested in a line, the batteries all fit and all. So I found that the DeWalts just hold up for me. They do what I want, even if I need to do that. But I hope this helped you out with answering some questions. If you got any questions about these tools, ask me in the comments down below. If you're a pro, let me know what you think. What kind of tools do you use? Do you have this many extra blades? You probably do if you've been doing this a while. And otherwise, I hope you guys be sure and subscribe. Check out our website at thatkiltedguy.com and download our free guides. Thanks a lot, you guys, for checking us out. We'll see you on the next video.